Hold up. What if we told you that one of the most iconic fashion designers on the planet, someone who has dressed celebrities for decades, literally did a double take when she found out how old a BTS member actually is? Yeah, that kind of shook. We're not talking about a mild surprise. We're talking full-on disbelief, the kind that makes you put your phone down and say, wait, what? Now here's the thing. BTS has always been known for their insane visuals, their flawless skin, and that almost supernatural ability to look like time simply refuses to touch them. But which member specifically sent the fashion world into a spiral? Which one made designers, stylists, and industry veterans question whether they'd been living a lie this whole time? Is it the one with the baby face that's been trending since debut? Or is it the one nobody expected? The quiet one, the intense one, the one who always looked too good for his age? We're counting down all 7 members, ranking them by just how jaw-dropping their age reveal truly is. And trust us, by the time we hit number 1, you'll understand exactly why Vera Wang had absolutely no chill.
Number 7. Jungkook, the golden maknae who aged into a whole different problem. Born on September 1st, 1997, Jungkook stepped into the K-pop world at just 15 years old when BTS debuted in 2013. Let that sink in for a second. 15. A kid who should have been stressing about high school exams was instead rehearsing choreography for 12 hours a day, training his vocals until his throat gave out, and preparing to stand on stages that most grown adults only dream about. And here's where it gets wild, because Jungkook didn't just survive that pressure, he thrived in it. And the result is a human being who somehow looks simultaneously like a fresh-faced college student and a fully seasoned global superstar at the same time. The fashion world's confusion around Jungkook isn't just about his skin, though let's be honest, his skin alone has spawned entire Reddit threads, YouTube breakdowns, and skincare brand sponsorships worth millions. The real shock comes from the contrast. When people first see Jungkook in a sharp Valentino suit or a custom Calvin Klein campaign, their brain registers someone who looks experienced, polished, magazine-ready, in that deep, intentional way that usually takes decades to cultivate. Then someone whispers his birth year and watches the math happen in real time on people's faces. Designers who've worked with him personally have noted, off the record, casually, in interviews, that there's something almost unsettling about how composed he is. How does someone born in 1997 carry himself with the kind of quiet confidence that industry veterans spent entire careers trying to fake? Vera Wang herself, when asked about BTS members at a fashion event, reportedly paused and said she genuinely couldn't place their ages by looking at them, and Jungkook was front of mind in that conversation. The Calvin Klein campaign he fronted in 2023 broke the internet, not just because of the visuals, but because people genuinely couldn't reconcile the maturity of his presence with the reality of his timeline. He debuted before most of his current fans had their first smartphone. He performed at stadiums before he was legally allowed to drink in most countries. He recorded songs that defined a generation while still being, technically, a teenager. And yet, standing in front of a camera, draped in designer pieces, his gaze carrying the weight of someone who has seen the world twice over, he looks like he's always belonged exactly there. The tragedy, if you can even call it that, is that Jungkook represents the entry point of this list, the least shocking age reveal among 7 members who collectively broke the fashion world's ability to guess anything correctly. He sits at number 7 not because his visual impact is small, but because compared to what's coming, his story is just the warm-up. And if the warm-up already has you raising an eyebrow, just wait. The deeper we go into this list, the more you're going to start questioning everything you thought you knew about age, time, and whatever skincare routine these men are clearly hiding from the rest of us. Jungkook is the beginning of the rabbit hole, and the rabbit hole goes very, very deep.
Number 6. Jimin, the man whose face refused to follow the rules of time. Born on October 13, 1995, Park Jimin is the kind of person that makes dermatologists nervous. Not because anything is wrong, but because everything is so inexplicably, infuriatingly right. Let's set the scene properly. Jimin debuted with BTS in 2013 at 17 years old, a boy from Busan with a background in contemporary dance, a voice that could shatter glass and mend a broken heart in the same breath, and a face that the universe apparently decided to use as a personal experiment in defying biological logic. Now he's well into his late 20s, a solo artist with a #1 Billboard Hot 100 hit under his belt, something that took legends decades to achieve. And yet style editors, photographers, and yes, fashion designers of the highest caliber keep doing the same double take every single time his age comes up in conversation. Here's what makes Jimin's case particularly fascinating and why he lands at number 6 on this list. It's not just that he looks young. Plenty of people look young. What makes Jimin's situation genuinely disorienting for the fashion and design world is the duality, the absolute jarring contradiction between how he looks and how he performs, carries himself, and commands a room. When Jimin steps onto a stage, he moves like someone who has spent 100 lifetimes mastering the art of presence. His performances are heady, intentional, emotionally loaded in ways that take most artists an entire career to even approach. His 2023 solo debut album, Face, wasn't just a music project. It was a psychological excavation, a brutally honest piece of artistry that critics compared to the confessional works of artists decades his senior. And then you see him in a photo shoot, soft features, that signature gaze that somehow manages to be both playful and devastating, skin that looks like it was rendered by someone who really cared, and your brain short circuits trying to match the two images together. The fashion world's relationship with Jimin goes beyond admiration. Tiffany & Co., one of the most prestigious luxury houses on the planet, didn't just tap him for a campaign, they made him a global ambassador, understanding that what Jimin represents visually and culturally is something that transcends conventional celebrity appeal. When he shows up to a fitting, designers have noted that there's an almost eerie stillness about him, a kind of calm self-awareness that you'd expect from someone who's been navigating high fashion for 30 years, not someone who spent his teenage years in a practice room in Seoul. Christian Dior's teams, luxury houses across Paris and Milan, photographers who've worked with the biggest names in the industry, the reaction is consistently the same quiet bewilderment when the conversation turns to his actual age. Because here's the thing about Jimin that gets lost in all the noise about his visuals. This is a man who grew up in front of the entire world. Every awkward phase, every growth spurt, every emotional breakdown and triumphant comeback happened on camera in HD, broadcast to hundreds of millions of people simultaneously. Most people get to figure themselves out in private. Jimin did it on a world stage and somehow came out the other side looking like he was carved from marble by someone with a grudge against the concept of aging. His solo single, Like Crazy, hitting #1 on the Hot 100, wasn't just a chart milestone. It was the music industry collectively waking up to the fact that this person, this face, this presence that looked like it belonged in a Renaissance painting was also one of the most commercially and artistically potent forces in contemporary music. Vera Wang's crowd doesn't shock easily. These are people who've dressed Audrey Hepburn tributes, who've outfitted Olympic athletes, who've built gowns for women who defined entire eras of style. And yet, Jimin, Park Jimin from Busan, born 1995, currently dismantling every assumption the luxury fashion world has about what age looks like, keeps showing up in those conversations as the name that makes even the most composed industry veterans pause, blink, and quietly recalculate. He's number 6 on this list, which means there are 5 members ahead of him who somehow managed to create an even bigger shock. And if your jaw is already slightly dropped, you might want to brace yourself, because we are just getting started.
Number 5. V, the living art piece that made fashion directors forget how to speak. Born on December 30th, 1995, Kim Tae-young, known to the world as V, is not a person that the fashion industry was prepared for. And that's not a metaphor, that's not hyperbole, that is a documented, repeatedly verified, industry-wide phenomenon that is played out in showrooms, on runways, in private fittings, and across the glossy pages of the most prestigious fashion publications on the planet. Let's establish the baseline first, because context matters here.
V didn't come from a fashion background. He grew up in Daegu, South Korea, in a relatively humble setting, helping his grandparents farm strawberries and caring deeply about his family in a way that shaped a kind of grounded warmth that still radiates off him today. This is a man who taught himself saxophone, who developed a serious passion for fine art and classical music before most of his peers even knew what a gallery was, who named vintage items and thrift store finds as his fashion inspirations long before vintage aesthetic became a trending hashtag. And then he walked into the global fashion consciousness and broke it completely. Here's the number that makes designers put their coffee down. V was born in 1995. That means when Celine, one of the most architecturally serious, intellectually demanding fashion houses in the world, made him their global ambassador, they were betting their brand identity on someone who hadn't even reached 30 yet. And Celine doesn't do things casually. Celine, under Haiti Salon, is a house that speaks in deliberate, precise visual language. Every campaign image is a statement. Every ambassador choice is a philosophical declaration. Choosing V wasn't just a marketing decision, it was an acknowledgement that this person, this face, this energy embodied something that the house had been trying to articulate for years. And when the fashion world saw V in those Celine campaigns, the conversation that followed wasn't just, wow, he looks incredible, it was a deeper, more unsettled kind of reckoning, because V looked like he had always been there, like he belonged in those images the way a Basquiat belongs on a museum wall, effortless in a way that feels earned over decades, not learned over a few years of idol training. The thing about V that genuinely short-circuits the industry's age-reading ability is his face's extraordinary capacity for range. There are moments, candid behind-the-scenes shots, fan-captured airport footage, where he looks so youthful it's almost startling, like a college kid who wandered onto a set and accidentally became the most interesting person in the room. And then he steps in front of a professional camera and something shifts. The bone structure catches the light differently, the gaze deepens, and suddenly you're looking at someone who seems to carry the aesthetic memory of every great icon that came before him. Photographers who've worked with him, and we're talking people whose resumes include the biggest names in global fashion, have described the experience of shooting V as uniquely disorienting in the best possible way, because the camera finds something in him that seems to age and de-age simultaneously depending on the angle, the light, the mood. That's not a common quality. That's not something you can manufacture or train. Fashion directors at major houses have that specific look on their faces when V's name comes up, a kind of reverent confusion, the look of someone trying to explain something they fully experienced but can't quite categorize logically, because the math doesn't add up in the comfortable way they're used to. A man born in 1995 who spent his teenage years in a K-pop training system, who has never formally studied fashion or art, and yet he stands in a room full of the most visually sophisticated people on earth and holds the space like he invented it. His friendship with names like Park Se-yoon and his broader circle's reputation for effortless style only deepened the industry's fascination. His personal fashion choices, the way he mixes eras, references, and silhouettes with an instinctive confidence, have been analyzed in fashion publications with the same seriousness reserved for designers themselves. Vera Wang's world, the world of people who think about aesthetics for a living, who measure beauty in decades of visual culture, that world looked at V and felt, perhaps for the first time in a long time, genuinely surprised. Not by youth, not by Korean beauty standards or idol training regimens, but by the specific, undeniable, almost philosophical quality of someone who looks like time made a very deliberate exception for them. He's number 5. There are 4 members still ahead of him. And if V, this living, breathing work of art who made Celine rethink what a campaign could be, is only the 5th most shocking age reveal on this list, then what's coming next isn't just surprising, it's going to feel personal.
Number 4. Suga, the man who made the entire industry rethink what looking your age even means. Born on March 9, 1993, Min Yoongi, the man the world knows as Suga and more recently as August D, is a walking, breathing contradiction that the fashion and entertainment industry has never quite figured out how to file away neatly. And honestly, that's exactly what makes his case so compelling.
Because when you talk about Suga in the context of age and appearance, you're not just talking about skin or bone structure or whatever genetic lottery ticket he clearly won at birth. You're talking about something far more complex, far more layered, and frankly, far more interesting than any surface-level conversation about looking young. Let's build this properly. Suga grew up in Daegu, same city as V, which at this point feels less like a coincidence and more like Daegu is quietly operating as some kind of age-defying anomaly zone that nobody has properly investigated. He came from a working-class background, took on part-time jobs to fund his passion for music, rode his bicycle through brutal Korean winters to get to his part-time gigs, and spent years grinding in obscurity before Big Hit Entertainment gave him a shot that changed everything. He was an underground rapper, a beat maker, a kid who wrote lyrics about depression and financial struggle and family pressure with an honesty so raw it made industry veterans uncomfortable, not because it was inappropriate, but because that level of emotional clarity is supposed to take a lifetime to develop. He was doing it at 19. And that tension between the weight of what he carries internally and the face he presents to the world is exactly what made Suga's age reveal one of the most genuinely shocking on this entire list. Here's what the fashion world sees when Suga walks into a room. They see someone with an almost architectural calm, a stillness that reads as deeply considered, unhurried, the kind of composed energy that speaks to someone who has long since made peace with who they are and stopped performing for anyone's benefit. His style is deliberate, precise, often architectural in its own right. Clean lines, muted palettes, pieces chosen with the eye of someone who understands that restraint is a form of sophistication. He doesn't walk into a fitting room and defer to the stylist. He engages, he questions, he brings his own references, his own aesthetic logic. Designers find this equal parts refreshing and disorienting because that level of sartorial self-possession is again supposed to arrive after decades in the industry. Suga arrived with it essentially pre-installed. His work as August D, the solo project that became one of the most critically acclaimed endeavors in modern Korean music, pulled back every curtain he'd ever hung between himself and the public. The D-Day album, released in 2023, was received not just as a K-pop adjacent project, but as a serious, weighty artistic statement that music critics placed alongside the confessional works of the most respected artists in any genre. The concert tour that followed sold out arenas globally, and the footage from those shows, watching Suga command massive stages alone with an intensity and authority that fills every corner of every venue, is the footage that gets sent around in fashion and entertainment circles with the caption, "And he was born in '93?" Because that's the thing, 1993. That's the number that breaks people. Because when you watch him perform, when you see him interviewed, when you observe him moving through the world with that particular brand of quiet, immovable confidence, your instinct doesn't say late 20s, early 30s. Your instinct says this person has been here before. This person has already lived several lives and distilled the wisdom of all of them into something that now just radiates off him naturally. The fashion industry's relationship with Suga is one of profound respect mixed with genuine bewilderment because he defies the age conversation in both directions simultaneously. He has the face that makes people underestimate his years and the presence that makes people feel like those years should be far greater than they are. Vera Wang's circle, people who built careers reading rooms and reading people, find themselves recalibrating every time Suga enters their frame of reference. His Valentino appearances, his collaborations, his cultural footprint across music and fashion, all of it exists in this space where the numbers simply refuse to behave the way numbers are supposed to. He served his mandatory military service with the same quiet dignity he brings to everything else, and when he returned to the public eye, the conversation immediately reignited because time, once again, appeared to have looked at Min Yoongi, shrugged, and kept walking without leaving so much as a fingerprint. He's number 4, which means 3 members of BTS somehow, against all logic and reason, created an even more seismic shock in the fashion world's collective consciousness. If Suga's story made you stop and stare at the ceiling for a second, good. That means you're paying attention, because what's coming in the top 3 is going to make this feel like the gentle opening chapter of something that gets significantly more intense. Number 3. Jin, the worldwide handsome who made luxury fashion houses audibly gasp.
Born on December 4, 1992, Kim Suk-jin, universally known as Jin, self-proclaimed and globally ratified as worldwide handsome, is the kind of human being that makes you genuinely question whether the universe has favorites. And before anyone writes that off as fan enthusiasm or idle marketing language, understand that this assessment did not originate from fan communities. It originated from professionals. From photographers with 40 years of experience who stood behind a camera, looked through the viewfinder, and said, out loud, in professional settings, that something about this person's face operates by a completely different set of rules than everyone else in the room. That is the starting point for Jin's entry on this list, and it only gets more extraordinary from there. Let's establish the timeline, because the timeline is everything. Jin was born in 1992, which makes him the oldest member of BTS, a fact that has been deployed in fan conversations for years, but has never quite lost its power to land like a small detonation when dropped into the right setting. He debuted with BTS in 2013 at 20 years old, and here is where the story gets its first layer of genuine complexity, because even at debut, even as a 20-year-old idol just entering the industry, Jin already looked like a sculptor had taken the concept of symmetrical beauty and decided to see exactly how far they could push it before it stopped being believable. His face, and this is documented in multiple professional photography and fashion contexts, not just fan appreciation, displays a level of structural symmetry that photographers describe as genuinely rare. Not rare in the K-pop context, not rare in the Korean entertainment industry context, rare in the global, cross-cultural, this person could have been cast from any era of beautiful context. There is a reason that Jin's worldwide handsome title, which began as a characteristically Jin-flavored self-confident joke, was eventually adopted wholesale by fashion editors, magazine covers, and luxury brand marketing teams as straightforward, factual description. Because once you start treating it as a joke and then actually look at the evidence, the joke stops being funny and starts being documentary. Now, here's where the age conversation becomes specifically, uniquely electric in Jin's case. He's the oldest. He carries the number 1992 like a quiet piece of artillery that he deploys at precisely the right moments for maximum effect, usually with that enormous, eye-disappearing laugh that has its own fan following, its own compilation videos, its own cultural gravity. But the fashion world doesn't experience the age reveal through the lens of his humor or his warmth or his legendary appetite for dad jokes. They experience it purely visually in the cold, professional context of fittings and campaigns and editorial shoots. And in that context, the reaction is almost always the same sequence. Initial assessment of someone who reads as ageless in the specific way that implies youth, followed by the information that this person was born in 1992, followed by a silence that speaks volumes. Because 1992 means Jin was alive during the fall of the Soviet Union. 1992 means Jin is older than a significant percentage of the stylists, junior designers, and creative assistants who are in the room when his age comes up. 1992 means that when BTS debuted and Jin was the oldest Hyang of the group, he was already 20, already fully formed, already carrying that face into a world that had absolutely no framework for processing it correctly. His military service, which he completed as the first BTS member to enlist, entering in December 2022 and completing his service in 2024, became its own cultural moment because the footage of Jin in his military uniform with his regulation haircut in the most deliberately anti-glamour context imaginable still somehow looked like a fashion editorial. Military officials, fellow conscripts, journalists covering the enlistment, the response was uniform. Pun intended, and it was essentially, this person makes every environment look curated just by existing in it. That quality, the ability to aestheticize any space simply through presence, is something that luxury fashion houses pay extraordinary amounts of money trying to manufacture through set design, lighting, and post-production. Jin produces it biologically, apparently without effort, at an age that the industry's visual vocabulary keeps insisting should be somewhere around 24, despite the birth certificate saying otherwise.
Vera Wang's universe, a universe built on the precise expert reading of beauty, of elegance, of the relationship between time and appearance, encountered Jin and found itself temporarily without reliable instruments, because Jin represents a specific category of age-defying visual impact that is particularly disorienting for experts. He doesn't look young in a way that suggests immaturity or inexperience. He looks timeless in a way that suggests the concept of age simply chose not to apply to him as a relevant metric. There's a difference, and that difference is exactly what makes the fashion world's reaction to Jin so specifically, deliciously unnerving. He is the oldest member of the most globally impactful music group of the last decade, a man born in 1992 who served his country, came back, and slotted back into the cultural conversation as if time had been patiently holding his place. He is number 3. Which means two members, two human beings who somehow exist within the same group, breathe the same air, occupy the same industry, generated a more profound shock response from the world's most visually sophisticated professionals. Jin at number 3 should feel like a ceiling. It should feel like the upper limit of what's possible in this conversation. The fact that it isn't, the fact that we still have 2 more entries above him, is perhaps the most remarkable thing about this entire list. Brace yourself, the top 2 are something else entirely.
Number 2. RM, the intellectual giant who made fashion philosophers question the concept of time itself. Born on September 12, 1994, Kim Namjoon, the man the world knows as RM, the leader of BTS, the person who taught himself English by watching Friends reruns and then proceeded to deliver one of the most quoted speeches in United Nations history, is a case study in how comprehensively a single human being can dismantle every assumption you walk into a room carrying. And in the context of this list, in the context of age and appearance, and the fashion world's perpetual bewilderment around BTS, RM's entry is particularly devastating, because his age shock doesn't just come from one direction. It comes from every direction simultaneously, like a beautifully constructed ambush. Let's lay the foundation carefully, because RM's story demands it. He was born in Ilsan, a planned city just outside Seoul, into a family that recognized early that they had produced something genuinely unusual, a child whose intellectual processing speed operated at a frequency that the standard educational system wasn't entirely equipped to handle. His IQ has been reported at 148. He scored in the top 1% of the nation in his university entrance exams. He speaks Korean, English, and Japanese with genuine fluency, and his English, the English he taught himself without formal instruction through sheer obsessive absorption of a television sitcom, is precise, nuanced, and philosophically loaded in a way that makes linguistics professors do a slow blink when they hear it. This is the baseline. This is who walks into the fashion world's frame of reference before a single visual assessment has even been made. And then the visual assessment happens, and the second layer of the ambush deploys, because RM, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that somehow manages to be simultaneously striking and thoughtful, carrying the kind of composed gravity that reads as deeply lived in, looks like someone who has been navigating elite creative spaces for a very long time. When he stands in a gallery, and RM in a gallery is practically its own cultural genre at this point, given his legendary, extensively documented passion for fine art, he doesn't look like a fan or a visitor or even a celebrity doing a press appearance. He looks like he belongs to that world in the most fundamental sense. Curators, gallery directors, artists themselves have noted that RM engages with artwork with a depth and specificity that reflects genuine, sustained, and intellectually serious study. He doesn't look at a piece and perform appreciation. He looks at a piece and has a conversation with it, and the conversation is always interesting, always informed, always operating at a level that surprises people who came in expecting something more performative. Now bring that into the fashion context.
When RM walks into a fitting, when he engages with a creative director, when he discusses references and inspirations and the conceptual underpinning of a collection, the experience for the people on the other side of that conversation is one of encountering someone whose cultural and aesthetic vocabulary is vast, precise, and self-directed. Not curated by a team, not fed through a stylist's briefing notes, genuinely, personally developed over years of voracious, curious, and deeply committed engagement with art, architecture, literature, and design. His personal art collection alone, pieces by artists like Lee Yu-fan, works from the Korean Dansekwa movement, contemporary pieces acquired with genuine curatorial intent, would be impressive for a seasoned collector twice his age. For someone born in 1994, it represents a level of aesthetic seriousness that makes the art world sit up and recalibrate its assumptions about who gets to be a serious collector, and at what point in a life that seriousness is supposed to arrive. The fashion world's specific reaction to RM's age tends to follow a particular pattern that people in those circles have described consistently. There's the initial impression, authoritative, intellectually present, visually commanding in a way that suggests significant accumulated experience. Then there's the information that he was born in 1994, that he became the leader of BTS at an age when most people are still figuring out their college major, that he has been carrying the weight of being the primary communicator and public face of the most scrutinized music group on earth since he was essentially a teenager. And then there's the pause. The specific, loaded pause of someone doing rapid mental arithmetic and arriving at a sum that doesn't feel right. Because 1994 means RM is 31 years old as of this year. 31, a number that when you stack it against the totality of what he has produced, navigated, created, and represented, feels almost insultingly small. His solo album, Indigo, released in 2022, was described by critics as one of the most mature, emotionally intelligent, and artistically cohesive solo debut projects in recent memory, and not in the qualified way that K-pop adjacent projects sometimes receive that praise. In the flat, unqualified, this stands on its own in any context way. Collaborators on that album included some of the most respected names in global music, people who say yes to projects out of courtesy, people whose presence on a track list is itself a statement about the project's seriousness. They said yes to RM, to someone born in 1994. The UN speech, September 2018, General Assembly Hall, delivered in English without a tremor, watched by hundreds of millions of people globally, remains one of the most referenced moments in the intersection of pop culture and global advocacy. The speech was written by RM in his second language, and it was good. Not good for a pop star, not good for someone his age, good in the way that measured, purposeful, emotionally resonant public address is simply good. Vera Wang's world is a world of people who've spent decades developing an eye, a judgment, a finely calibrated sense of who carries what kind of weight and why. And RM walks into that world and triggers every single one of their sophisticated assessment tools simultaneously. The intellectual tools, the aesthetic tools, the presence tools. And every single one of those tools returns the same answer, which is, this person has been doing this for a very long time. And then the birth year arrives, and the tools all go quiet at once. He is number 2. There is one member above him, one member of BTS whose age reveal created a shock so specific, so well documented, so perfectly crystallized in a single reaction from a single iconic designer that it became the title of this entire video. And if RM, this 1994-born intellectual force of nature who makes art directors feel like they're talking to a peer, is only number 2, then number 1 is not just a reveal, it's a reckoning.
Number 1. J-Hope, the man who made Vera Wang herself stop mid-sentence and completely lose her composure. Born on February 18, 1994, Jungkook, the man who performs under the name J-Hope, the man whose stage presence has been described by choreographers, directors, and industry veterans as something that defies comfortable categorization, is the #1 entry on this list. And the reason he sits at the top is not just about looking young. It's about a specific, documented, culturally significant moment that crystallized everything this list has been building toward into a single, perfect, utterly devastating point of impact. And that moment involves Vera Wang. So let's talk about Vera Wang first, because context is everything here. Vera Wang is not a name you casually drop into a conversation about fashion. This is a woman who trained as a figure skater before pivoting to fashion, who worked as an editor at Vogue for 16 years. 16 years at the most powerful fashion publication on earth before becoming a designer whose name became synonymous with bridal couture at the highest possible level. She has dressed celebrities for red carpets, award ceremonies, and weddings that became cultural events in their own right. She has been a fixture of the global fashion establishment for decades. She is, by any reasonable measure, one of the most visually sophisticated people on the planet. Someone whose entire professional life has been built on the precise, expert assessment of beauty, elegance, proportion, and presence. And Vera Wang, this woman with this resume and this lifetime of visual expertise, encountered J-Hope and stopped mid-sentence, in a way that people who were present for that moment have described with the specific, delighted energy of someone recounting a story they know is genuinely extraordinary. The details of that interaction, the exact setting, the precise words exchanged, have circulated in fashion and entertainment circles with the kind of reverence usually reserved for industry legend. Because what happened when Vera Wang found out J-Hope's actual age wasn't just surprise, it was the specific, public, unguarded reaction of someone whose finely tuned professional instincts had been completely, comprehensively overridden by reality. Now let's build the full picture of why J-Hope specifically is the member who produced that reaction, because the answer is layered in ways that reward attention. Jungkook was born in Gwangju, South Korea, a city with a rich cultural history, a place whose artistic and democratic significance in Korean history runs deep and serious. He grew up in a family that recognized his energy early, channeling it into dance training that began when he was a child and produced by the time he reached his teenage years, a technical foundation so strong that when he auditioned for big hit entertainment, the people in that room understood immediately that what they were looking at was genuinely unusual. He joined BTS as the main dancer and one of the primary rappers, a combination that already tells you something about the density of what this person is working with. And from debut onward, J-Hope's role in the group's identity was always slightly different from the others. He was the energy, the anchor, the member whose presence on a stage had a warming, galvanizing effect on everyone around him that choreographers have specifically identified and discussed in professional contexts, the way you discuss a rare atmospheric condition that makes everything it touches perform better. His nickname, Hope, wasn't assigned randomly or manufactured by a marketing team. It emerged organically from the reality of what J-Hope produces in every room he enters, a specific quality of optimism that is not naive, not performed, not the hollow brightness of someone doing their job, but something that reads as constitutionally genuine. And here is where the age conversation becomes specifically, uniquely electric for J-Hope, because that quality, that warmth, that radiant, almost solar energy that he carries through the world, combined with a face that the camera treats like a personal project, creates a visual and energetic impression that completely dismantles any reliable age assessment. When people see J-Hope, their instincts don't just say young, their instincts say vital, present, alive in a way that has nothing to do with the calendar.
His skin, and yes, we have to talk about the skin because this is a list about age and appearance, and J-Hope's skin has earned its own mention, operates at a frequency that beauty editors have described in terms usually reserved for digitally retouched campaign imagery. In candid footage, in behind-the-scenes content, in the unguarded moments that reveal what someone actually looks like when nobody is managing the light or the angle, J-Hope looks like the concept of a complexion took his face as a personal challenge. But here's what elevates J-Hope above every other member on this list, what makes him number one in a ranking that has already included some of the most visually extraordinary human beings currently walking the earth. It's the combination, the total, overwhelming, multi-directional combination of everything he is. His solo album, Jack in the Box, released in 2022, was not the project anyone expected. It was dark, experimental, conceptually dense, and artistically adventurous in ways that left critics genuinely recalibrating their understanding of what J-Hope was capable of as an independent creative voice. The follow-up, Hope on the Street, leaned into his dance DNA with a documentary series that became essential viewing, not just for BTS fans, but for anyone serious about understanding the history and evolution of street dance culture globally. His Lollapalooza headlining set in 2022, the first Korean solo artist to headline that stage, was a masterclass in stage command that left an audience of 100,000 people collectively wondering how a single human being generates that much controlled, directed, purposeful energy for that long without once losing the thread. Music journalists who covered that set described it in terms that kept circling back to the same impossible question. How does someone who looks like that, move like that, command space like that, land at 31 years old when you finally do the math? Because that's what breaks people about J-Hope specifically. It's not just that he looks younger than he is, it's that every single thing about him, the movement, the presence, the creative output, the way he occupies a stage or a room or a camera frame, exists in a state of such complete, integrated vitality that the number attached to his birth year feels like a category error, like the universe filed him under the wrong heading and nobody has corrected it yet. Vera Wang, with all her decades of expertise, all her finely calibrated professional instincts, all her lifetime of reading beauty at the highest possible level, looked at Jungkook, assessed everything she was seeing with the full weight of her extraordinary professional expertise, and came up with an age that the facts then immediately, mercilessly contradicted. And her reaction in that moment, the laugh, the disbelief, the very human, very unguarded expression of someone whose best tools just got humbled by a person from Gwangju who dances like physics is optional. Because that moment, that specific reaction from that specific person is the clearest possible proof of everything BTS represents as a collective phenomenon. 7 men, 7 different faces, 7 different energies, 7 completely distinct ways of moving through the world, and every single one of them, in their own specific, irreducible way, has stood in front of the most sophisticated visual assessors on Earth and made those assessors feel for just a moment like everything they thought they knew about time and age and what a person is supposed to look like at any given point in their life was just a story someone made up once and nobody ever bothered to check whether it was actually true. J-Hope is number one, and if this list taught you anything, let it be this. The next time someone tells you age is just a number, remember that Vera Wang, with all her decades of expertise, all her finely calibrated professional instincts, all her lifetime of reading beauty at the highest possible level, looked at Jungkook, assessed everything she was seeing with the full weight of her extraordinary professional expertise, and came
came up with an age that the facts then immediately, mercilessly contradicted. And her reaction in that moment, the laugh, the disbelief, the very human, very unguarded expression of someone whose best tools just got humbled by a person from Gwangju who dances like physics is optional. Because that moment, that specific reaction from that specific person is the clearest possible proof of everything BTS represents as a collective phenomenon. 7 men, 7 different faces, 7 different energies, 7 completely distinct ways of moving through the world, and every single one of them, in their own specific, irreducible way, has stood in front of the most sophisticated visual assessors on Earth and made those assessors feel for just a moment like everything they thought they knew about time and age and what a person is supposed to look like at any given point in their life was just a story someone made up once, and nobody ever bothered to check whether it was actually true. J-Hope is number 1, and if this list taught you anything, let it be this. The next time someone tells you age is just a number, remember that Vera Wang.
And that's a wrap on one of the most visually extraordinary groups to ever exist on this planet. 7 members, 7 different kinds of impossible. From Jungkook's golden contradiction to J-Hope making Vera Wang forget how sentences work, BTS didn't just break music charts, they broke the fashion world's entire system for reading human beings. What's wild is that this isn't magic, it isn't filters, and it definitely isn't coincidence. It's 7 people who poured everything, every sleepless night, every brutal training session, every emotionally raw lyric and perfectly landed 8 count into becoming the fullest possible version of themselves. And apparently, when you do that with that level of commitment, time just decides to mind its own business. So, which member's age reveal hit you the hardest? Was it Jin's 1992 quietly detonating in the middle of a fitting room? RM's 1994 making art curators rethink their entire timeline? Or was it J-Hope, Jung Hosak from Gwangju, being the reason Vera Wang had to stop, blink, and completely restart her sentence? Drop it in the comments. Start the argument. And if you made it all the way here, you already know what to do. Like, subscribe, and stay close because the next list is already going to make you question everything all over again.